Good morning. If you happen to be watching live, we certainly appreciate it. We want to get the quickest reaction we could from Josh Ward of the Sports Animal. He's on from noon to 3. I want to talk college football playoff committee and the latest selection show. Please hit that like button. The thumbs up button is absolutely fantastic. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Do it. Share. He's Josh. I'm Dave. It's brought to you by Zool Beer Company. I'll tell you more about the ultimate craft beer in Knoxville and the official craft beer of Off the Hook Sports. But first, Josh, I hope you're having a fantastic morning. And we had to stay up a little bit later than we expected because of some overtime before the college football playoff selection was announced. Your thoughts, Tennessee at 5. I'm pleasantly surprised that there was no shakeup. What do you think?
I thought that it would remain the same. It was a reminder, by the way, which I will offer here, that the unveiling of the playoff ranking update is a television show,
Yes.
not as much about where things stand. It's about sponsors and coverage and talk, which we are doing now, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of college football is built around that, right? So that's what it is. Tennessee is in the same position it was last week in that it needs to take care of business, and I think Tennessee will do that over the next couple of weeks. And then you pull against certain teams. The more chaos, the better in terms of losses in these other conferences. But TCU is an obvious team. USC is an obvious team. You don't want a close down to the wire, well played Ohio State, Michigan probably, but I think Tennessee's in a very good position. Just like Dave, I thought last week Tennessee was in a good position, and it got some help following last week's rankings with Oregon going down. If more help comes, Tennessee will be in the playoff.
Yes. I think Tennessee will likely be in the playoff, but let's say what if? What's the one doomsday thing that could happen? I could name probably 3 that would be bad for Tennessee, but if there are one in particular that you don't want to happen in the remainder of the regular season and in the SEC championship game, what would it be?
Well, to me, the biggest doomsday would be if TCU, LSU, and USC all went out. If that happens, then Tennessee has a real problem on its hands because it's gonna be asking to be the second SEC team to go into the playoff with the conference champ not making it. TCU's in, so that's the third spot there, and USC would make things very difficult. So that to me would be doomsday. I guess if you want to throw in a close Georgia Michigan, Ohio State Michigan game as well, but. TCU has a really good chance now to win out after winning at Texas. Let's see this week against Baylor. It's another challenging game, but it's very winnable for TCU. So those teams right now that are right in front of and right behind Tennessee, if they keep winning and their strength of schedule gets better, and Tennessee has a strength of schedule get a little bit worse because of 2 weak opponents to close out the season, that would be the doomsday scenario.
I heard this debate on a podcast that was out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and that is that the playoff committee really doesn't want TCU in there because they don't have as much of a national draw. Now, to me, as a college football fan across the board, I think it's a great story. So if I take any of my subjectivity out of it and I'm completely objective, I think TCU is a really good story. Does it have the same pool as Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee, Georgia, any of those? No, but I think it's a really good story. What do you think the committee would like to happen with TCU behind closed doors?
Well, there's no doubt that TCU draws less than the Tennessee brand, Michigan, Ohio State, USC. USC is LA, West Coast. There's a reason that Lincoln Riley went there, right? So, the committee members, I'm not sure how much they care, but to the college football playoff, to those bowl sites, uh, to the TV broadcast side of things, yeah, I'm sure that they would much prefer to have these big power names from the Big Ten, the SEC, or USC versus TCU. But for TCU, I think it's the easiest team to figure out, assuming there's not just complete destruction everywhere else, like Tennessee losing to South Carolina, something like that. TCU needs to be 13-0. If TCU's 12-1, I don't think it's in the playoff. And I think a loss by TCU would allow it to be a very easy choice there for the playoff committee to move on and give spots elsewhere. If TCU wins out, it's also very easy for the committee. TCU's in, and you have 2 or 3 teams that are vying for one spot.
As far as LSU, they host UAB, they go to Texas A&M, and then they'll play Georgia in the SEC championship game. If they were to win out and beat Georgia, where does that leave Tennessee? I think in a bad spot.
I would not call it a preferable spot. I know Tennessee blew out LSU. Watch the game. Very well aware of it. But if you're Tennessee, what your pitch is to the committee is, hey, take 2 SEC teams from the same division and don't take the conference champ. That's a pretty big ask, despite the head-to-head, because LSU's resume would also include win against Alabama, a win against Georgia, which would be the best win in the nation among all teams. The committee could easily write off that Florida State loss and say, well, it was week 1 and it was on a PAT at the end of the game. So I'm very well aware of the head-to-head, and I think Tennessee is better than LSU. I'm not pitching LSU over Tennessee. I'm saying from the committee standpoint, with the SEC standing as well, taking 2 SEC teams, but not taking the conference champ that would have the best wins of any team in the country would be a big ask. So if I'm Tennessee, I'm a big Georgia fan, assuming it's a 2-loss LSU team. If LSU loses to Texas A&M, then this conversation ends. But if LSU is a 2-loss team going in against Georgia, you are a big Georgia fan in the SEC title game. And the other thing I would add is, which I think we've covered, they've never taken a 2-loss team in the playoff history. Playoff history is 8 years long. Okay, we don't have that much history to talk about. In 2017, the playoff committee was expected to take 2-loss Auburn, but Auburn lost in the SEC title game. So you want LSU to Tennessee wants LSU to repeat Auburn's history from 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think if you listen to LSU people and people that cover LSU, and the podcast I was watching had LSU stuff draped all over the place. So I think they had a vested interest. But they seem to think that 3 teams from the SEC is possible. I think you and I've talked about that. I do not see that.
Yeah, I don't see that either. Now, if LSU wins out, could you argue that, hey, 3 teams, Georgia, LSU, and Tennessee, deserve spots among the 4, with the 4th being the winner of Ohio State, Michigan? Sure, you can make that argument. I just think it's a tough sell to the rest of the country, and putting 3 teams in it'd probably be a big waste of time. If we're going to come back to the eyeballs and all that, if they're just like, okay, so this is the SEC Invitational. So, there's the part of the conversation of, is it about getting the 3 best teams, or the 4 best teams? By the way, Alabama still might be one of the 4 best teams. They have 2 losses on the last 2 plays of the game to Tennessee and LSU. That's why Tennessee and LSU are in the conversation. I mean, numbers might bear out, depending on how Ohio State and Michigan perform over the next few weeks, that the 4 best teams are from the SEC. I'm not making that argument. Obviously, 4 teams are not going to go in, but it's not all about getting the 4 best teams in. That's the pitch, but there's so much more that goes into it than that.
Yeah, speaking of, I want to dig into that a little bit deeper. First, I want to remind everybody to hit that thumbs up button. We want you to like the podcast so we can bring you more at Off the Hook Sports. You can go to our YouTube channel, check out interviews with Cooper Mays weekly, also Jacob Warren weekly. We got a lot going on. John Adams, so he's on there with Josh Ward. I'm Dave Hooker, and it's brought to you by Zool Beer Company, xulbeer.com if you're on our audio platforms. And Josh, it's fantastic, worldwide award-winning craft beer.
Yeah, Zool's awesome. Great location, really cool environment, great beer selection, great design at Zool. So cool place, and different beer tastes for whatever your taste is.
No doubt. All right, and parking downtown, which you don't see a lot because I got a ticket just recently. So, Josh, my neighbors they've got the split flag on their post office box and their mailbox, and it's Michigan, Ohio State. And I drive by it and I think to myself, Tennessee doesn't care. They just want one team to win really, really big.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That helps the Vols a lot.
Yeah, if there's a blowout, the loser's not going, especially if Michigan were to go into Ohio State and whip the Buckeyes. If it's a close game and the road team loses, then there might be a conversation, because the conversation on Tennessee's side would be, okay, well, if we're trying to take two teams from the same division, Tennessee went to Georgia but got handled. Michigan lost a close one against Ohio State. Maybe neutral field, it's a closer affair. That's not my argument, but that's something you would have to battle if you're Tennessee. So, yeah, you want it to be a one-sided affair, and you don't want it to be a close game where the road team loses a well-played game.
What are your thoughts on the Heisman Trophy? Because you mentioned Alabama might still be one of the four best teams in the nation. I'm not sure that I think they are, but I do think that Bryce Young's play has gotten overlooked because of Alabama's struggles. I mean, to me, he'll be on my Heisman ballot somewhere. I think he has just been fantastic, and his play has gotten overlooked because Alabama has struggled with a down set of talent, especially at the skill positions, considering what Nick Saban's put forth previously. I think Bryce Young has just been fantastic.
He's awesome. He's a great player. Somebody, I'm a Raiders fan, not going great this year, but somebody tagged me on Twitter to a story linking the Raiders' potential draft position and the potential to draft Bryce Young, and I was very excited about that possibility, Dave, because of what he's done. But Alabama lost LSU, and that kind of booted him from realistically winning the Heisman because of the way the award is set up. What you're saying is the way that it should be. If you think he's like, the idea that being, if you're the best player in the country on a 10-2 football team, you're out of it. It's not what the award's supposed to be, right? But that's kind of how it is. And I'm not saying he should be the winner, but Bryce is terrific. I think it's a wide open race, as much as we've probably seen here with 2 weeks to go in the regular season. Hendon Hooker has a very good chance to win. CJ Stroud right now appears to have the best chance to win. That's another part of the conversation. If you want Ohio State to lose, you're kind of pulling against the Buckeyes at home because it could help your playoff positioning, and it could help Hendon with the Heisman, because beating out an undefeated CJ Stroud could be a tough task for the Heisman Trophy. But Drake May at UNC has been terrific. His numbers are incredible, and it's not the toughest conference schedule. He is on a one-loss team in the ACC. And then Blake Corum at Michigan, Caleb Williams at USC are some outside candidates, because the quarterbacks are really impressive and they're on really good teams. Probably makes it tougher on a running back. Again, that to me is an indictment on the award. But Hendon's in a good position, but kind of like Tennessee with the playoff chances, Hendon, despite his terrific numbers, will probably need some help down the stretch in terms of team performance or some dud performances by the individual players, because really, no matter what Hendon does against South Carolina or Vanderbilt, it's not going to be a chance to wow voters because of who Tennessee is playing. Stroud's going to have a chance against Michigan. Caleb Williams is going to have a chance against quality opponents, big games that will get a lot of attention with the playoff on the line as well. UNC with an ACC title game coming up. So the opportunity to build the Heisman resume is more there. And just, Blake Corum, what if he runs for 200 yards in a road win at Ohio State? All of a sudden, he might get more attention. So if you're going to be throwing bombs in the final minute or two of the game this Saturday, maybe let Hendon Hooker do it, not Joe Milton.
Fair. Okay. So I haven't spoken to you since the Mizzou game. Mm-hmm. Tennessee tacks on that extra touchdown. What was the most motivating factor in that? Let the backups play some more and score and have success? Or was it Eli Drinkwitz and his summer comments? Or lastly, was it impress the committee? What was the ultimate motivation that topped the list for Josh Heupel?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I would probably rank it like this: impress the committee. The committee, 66, looks really good. Number 2, the backups, because you can use them as the reason for doing it. Hey, it was the backups. Well, Joe Milton has the most impressive arm on earth. So, he doesn't have a backup arm, I'll tell you that much. And then third, probably Drinkwitz. And that also, was probably, it could have been in the back of Josh Heupel's mind, kind of the keep our name out your mouth. I know that's been brought up a lot. My personal opinion, didn't care that they did it, kind of laughed. If somebody doesn't like it, very easy to explain why, because it wasn't running the offense necessarily. It was if that's not running it up, then there is no such thing as running up the score. If you're throwing 50, 60 yards down the field with a minute to go in the game when you already have 59 points and the other team has waved the white flag, punting the ball back to you. So it did not bother me at all. But I understand if people didn't like it, and on the outside you see that and you're like, well, what's going on there? Because they on the outside you probably think about the Drinkwitz comments back in the summer. So put the combination together. I also think Josh Heupel has made it pretty clear, hey, we're going to play for 60 minutes, and we're going to go all the way. Once they got inside the 5, might as well run it in for a touchdown. So it's not the scoring part to me. It's the launching bombs away on Missouri's defense that had quite enough at that point.
But it is though a read option style, and I mean that downfield in terms of, it kind of reminds me of Steve Spurrier's offense where you make reads based off what the safety does. So that was the read. So to me, it's somewhat similar, analogous maybe, to if you run the triple option and you pitch and he breaks it for 50. So if that's the way the offense is set up, I don't have a problem with that. I will say this, though.
There's also historically a play called the dive where you hand it off.
Are you completely running the football?
There's that. There's I believe there's a particular formation when you're up 59-24 with a minute to go. It's called the victory formation. And you take the ball and you take a knee. So my thought on Monday coming out of it was because, Dave, I have to be honest, I was caught off guard. I did not anticipate how much attention it was. But on my radio show on Monday, it took over the last 2 hours. It was all anybody wanted to talk about was defending the decision. And my thought was I had no criticism of it at all. I just simply said, let's call it what it is. Like, we had one call, which Swain and I laughed about, said, it wasn't unsportsmanlike. Like, well, I don't know that sportsmanship was on display. I wouldn't argue on behalf of it. Just call it what it is. You wanted to put another touchdown on the board. You wanted to give Joe a chance. Cause like Swain pointed out, if it was a shot down the field to Grant Firking, okay, your senior day, for him to have this big play to go out on, that'd be a cool story. Well, it was a shot to your speedy freshman down the field. So, and there was they're better players because they ran those plays. I don't know that Squirrel White is a better football player. He's more excited. His stats are better, but just call it what it is. They wanted to put more points on the board. I don't think it's going to make a difference with the committee. I don't think the committee is going to say, well, if it had been 59-24, we're probably taking USC. But since they scored 66 on that final play, they're going in. Tennessee wanted to put points on the board. Tennessee fans were entertained. And by the way, the game was at home. It's maybe a more dangerous move if you do that on the road, because if you're on the road against a team that's probably tired of it, you might get a cheap shot late. But you're at home. Fans loved it. No apologies. And I don't think apologies are necessary. Maybe, I don't know what was whispered to Eli. Maybe it said, hey, that was for the playoff. Might have been, hey, you're lucky it wasn't 70. I don't know. But Eli handled it well, I thought. He said, hey, he runs his team, runs my team. And there was we've seen bad handshakes before. We didn't see it on Saturday.
See, I'm going to disagree with the one thing you said. You had the Eli comments from the summer at the very end of the motivation for that final drive. I think that was number one. I think
okay.
Yeah, I think the way that he wedged that, and I'm sure you've heard the audio in the Jim Rome show, the way he wedged that in during an intro, he wasn't even asked about Tennessee and ha ha ha. It didn't come across as funny.
Maybe it was number one. Yeah. I mean, it was number one in the minds of a lot of Tennessee fans going into the game of, hey, remember this. We played the audio last week. The receipts were kept. So maybe it was. We saw at the end of the UT Martin game that, there's a coach with a connection to Tennessee there that Tennessee was still wanted to take another shot, and that's against UT Martin. So maybe it was. It was a big mixing bowl of reasons that you can lay out for Tennessee to keep putting up points.
And lastly, people can read about this. Jimmy Himes wrote about it. Go to offthehooksports.com. What do you think about Rick Neuheisel, who kind of comes down hard on the balls during the broadcast and then at the quarterback club says, I think Tennessee will be in a rematch with Georgia and they'll beat them? What? I mean, that to me was a little bit surprising.
I think you'll hear more of that if they do end up playing, because this offense is still so impressive. And I think the further removed from the Georgia game, You'll hear more people saying, well, it was at Sanford Stadium and the crowd, and tough to beat a good team twice, and Tennessee's a really good team. And, Tennessee will have more time to prepare and respond to how things went. So I wasn't all that surprised. I think we'll hear more of that if Tennessee gets that chance to play Georgia again.
Yeah, it was entertaining. I'm not an Eli guy. I don't think Missouri should even be in the SEC, so I was all for it. And the fact that
it's a weird fit. It was just a few days after the extension and raise were announced too. Dave, I don't get it. Congrats to Eli Drinkwitz on his money, but going from $4 million to $6 million with a losing record at Missouri, and an extension, fine, you sell recruits, but a 50% raise and a $4 million salary, that was also good for Josh Heupel, because now Drinkwitz makes more than Josh Heupel now, because I can assure you after the season, Josh Heupel will be making more money than Eli Drinkwitz.
Eli Drinkwitz, nickname the Motivator. He makes more money. He runs his mouth. He makes your team want to play better on Saturday against them.
He's Steve Spurrier without the offense that terrifies you.
Yeah, or quick wit for that matter. All right, he's Josh Ward.
Well, I'd say I think he's probably the best mic in the SEC. He just doesn't have the results to go with it. I enjoy Sam Pittman. Kiffin's better on Twitter than on the mic, I think. So I think Drinkwitz brings the best media setting personality among coaches in the league.
Yeah, not a great
just his team stinks.
Yeah, not a great group for pulling from. Everybody seems very guarded nowadays.
I mean, look, sorry, I know we're out of time. If Jimbo wants to fire at Saban, that's number one. But that's a separate conversation.
Yeah, I don't think he's taking many shots nowadays. He's Josh Ward. I'm Dave Hooker. I checked Josh out on the Sports Animal in Knoxville, and it's brought to you by Zool Beer Company, xulbeer.com. If you're on our audio platform, if you're on the video, you can see it right there. So certainly appreciate Josh and his time. Follow him at Josh_Ward. And I'm Dave Hooker. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.